The Honourable John Banks.
I rise this morning to speak in support of the first reading of this Animal Welfare Amendment Bill. This bill is the result of a comprehensive review of our animal welfare laws, and I want to thank the Minister Nathan Guy for his important piece of work. The Animal Welfare Act was passed in 1999, and from day one I knew that this day would arrive some 14 years later, because at the time that this bill was the legislation we're amending was progressing through this Parliament, I told the National Party Minister at the time that there were gaping holes in the legislation that needed to be fixed. They weren't fixed then, and they're now being fixed now. And so the problem that we have is that, notwithstanding the select committee process that I was witness to those 14 years ago, the Minister ran roughshod over public sentiment and submissions to the select committee and barrelled on the advice of the officials, which I told the government of the day was wrong. The people told the government of the day it was wrong, and here we're trying to fix that wrong. So it is a golden opportunity for this government and this Parliament to fix some of the wrongs that should have been righted all those years ago. The bill will go some way to strengthening our standards of animal welfare and protecting animals from ill treatment. But it also represents a real missed opportunity to take our legal protections for animal a lot further and to be a world leader in the area of animal welfare. I'm pleased, for instance, that there'll be a new low-level offence, in inverted commas, close inverted commas, for people who hurt animals, so we aren't just focused on the worst offending. We need to be focused on all offending, and this bill addresses just that. I'm pleased the new regulations will specify mandatory and enforceable animal welfare standards. I'm pleased that the willful or reckless ill treatment of wild animals will now be an offence that can be prosecuted. These were issues I raised with the Minister at the time all those years ago, and so I'm pleased that some of them are being addressed in this piece of legislation. And I'm glad that the killing of an animal to test on it post-mortem and breeding an animal with known or potential compromised welfare will now need Animal Ethics Committee approval. I am not signed up to the proposition that an Animal Ethics Approval Committee is a sinecure for the problems we have around the treatment of animals in this country, and it will depend entirely on the quality of those individuals that are selected for that important piece of work around the implementation of this piece of legislation. But this bill, Mr. Chairman, as I said all those years ago in the Parliament from this seat, could achieve a lot more and should achieve a lot more. Let's start with live exports of animals for slaughter. Currently, there are no mandatory standards for live animal exports, so it's promising that this bill introduces them. The government's current approach to live exports for slaughter is that they are prohibited unless an exemption is granted. An exemption cannot be granted unless New Zealand trade reputation can be adequately managed. Well, this isn't just about trade reputation. It's about taking into account the suffering of animals and the suffering they go through when they're exported from sovereign states live to be slaughtered overseas. The Humane Society International has said that, quote, every year thousands and thousands of dead sheep are thrown overboard as ships depart for instance, Australian ports for the Middle East, either whole or minced, without care or consideration for the consequences of these actions. Live animal exports need to be very closely monitored indeed, if they are necessary at all, and I'm not convinced, but let the Select Committee hear evidence on that. Thankfully, there are currently no live exports from New Zealand, but I would like to encourage the Select Committee to look very carefully at why the provision for an exemption is even necessary. Most disappointingly, this bill totally fails to ban the testing of proactive or psychoactive substances on animals. Beagle puppies specifically bred to be used for testing are not being protected by a bill that claims to enhance animal welfare. It's an outrage that an unnecessary chemical could be tested on animals, and in the process the animals, will suffer unimaginable pain and a miserable death. New Zealanders made it very clear during the debate on the Psychoactive Substances Bill that they abhorred the idea of animals being tortured and killed so people can take recreational fun drugs. They marched on this Parliament, they signed petitions, they visited members of Parliament, they wrote to the Select Committee to voice their outrage. But their outrage fell on deaf ears. Sadly, the Health Select Committee refused to hear submissions about animal welfare. They told us at the time that it was the wrong bill to address the issue of animal testing. Well, this, Mr. Speaker, is the right bill to address the issue of animal testing. This is the Animal Welfare Reform Bill, and what better bill and piece of prospective legislation could be more useful for animal welfare than to ensure psychoactive substances are never tested on animals. Fun drugs shouldn't be tested on animals, full stop. The proposition I told the National Party at the time of the legislation going through this House, the Select Committee chairman, and anyone else who would listen. Well, this is the right bill, and I'm glad that the right bill, the right vehicle has arrived in the Parliament, not at the right time, but well overdue, but let's take that as an opportunity. I'll be supporting the supplementary order paper issued by Trevor Mallard to amend this bill to make it clear that no animal should be used in research or testing for the purposes of gaining approval for a psychoactive substance. But I also call on those individuals and animal welfare groups to submit to the Select Committee. This is their opportunity. It's better than a march. It's better than writing letters. It's better than individual members of Parliament being lobbied. Go to the Select Committee and make your views known. I ask the Select Committee to listen to New Zealanders and how they feel about animal rights. I want to leave you with a message from an animal welfare advocate and Auckland-based lawyer, Catriona McLennan, who has argued that this bill is too timid. I argue that this bill is too timid. I argue that this is the golden time of opportunity in the interest of animals that we are responsible for caring for while we share this earth with them. This is what she said. See, she suggested that the bill should start with the very basic statement that animals are living beings rather than inanimate objects. Animals are living beings. I think all New Zealanders can agree on that sentiment. Animals also feel pain, and we have a duty to protect them. So I say to the Chairman of the Select Committee, as you go into your deliberations, remember that animals have a right to live alongside us on this earth. They feel pain, and we need to protect them.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, I want to concur with everything that the Honourable John Banks has just said on this particular question.